A long, long time ago, in a land far away, there was a man named Isaiah. This man, known as a prophet, held a special role in society. He was not a king, a soldier, or a tradesman. No, Isaiah was a messenger, but not just any messenger. His task was to share messages straight from God. In this ancient time, God did not send emails or text messages. Instead, he chose people like Isaiah to speak his words. And one day, Isaiah had a particularly important message to deliver. He sought out King Ahaz and told him of a prophecy he had received. According to Isaiah, a special child would soon be born. This child wouldn't be just any baby. This child would be a sign from God himself, a beacon of hope in uncertain times. The baby would be called Emmanuel, a name that means God is with us. Just imagine a baby that symbolized God's presence among his people. But why was this prophecy so important, you might ask? Well, this was no ordinary forecast of the future. This prophecy was about the birth of someone truly special. This baby was to be Jesus, the Messiah. The Messiah is a title that means the chosen one. And Jesus, as the Messiah, was chosen by God to save his people. The prophecy may have been a surprise to King Ahaz, and perhaps he didn't fully understand its significance at the time. But we know now that what Isaiah foretold came to pass. Jesus was born, and his life and teachings have indeed changed the world. This story of Isaiah's prophecy is more than a tale from long ago. It's a reminder of God's plan, a plan that included a baby named Jesus, who was born in a manger, grew up to teach love and kindness, and ultimately changed the world. And so, Isaiah gave the first hint about the coming of a special baby who would change the world. Isaiah wasn't just about prophecies, he also shared messages of comfort. Now let's dive into one of Isaiah's most soothing messages. This is a story of reassurance and love, a story of how God, in his infinite wisdom and care, looks after his people. Imagine, if you will, a shepherd. This shepherd is not just any ordinary shepherd. He is diligent, kind, and caring. He knows each of his sheep by name, recognizes their bleats among 1,000 others, and even the most timid lamb feels safe under his watchful eye. His staff is a symbol of protection, warding off predators and guiding his flock through treacherous terrain. When a lamb strays, he leaves the 99 others to find the one that is lost. He cares for each one as if it was the only one. Now imagine that the shepherd is God and we are his sheep. This is the picture Isaiah paints in his message of comfort. Just as the shepherd knows his sheep, God knows us. He knows our joys and our sorrows, our triumphs and our trials, our dreams and our fears. He is there when we take our first step, and he is there when we stumble and fall. He is there in our laughter, and he is there in our tears. He watches over us just as the shepherd watches over his sheep. Like the shepherd, God guides us through life's challenges, and when we stray, he patiently brings us back. He protects us from harm and provides for our needs. He comforts us when we are scared and heals us when we are hurt. He loves us more than we can ever comprehend. This comforting message from Isaiah tells us that God is not distant or indifferent. He is a loving and caring shepherd who is actively involved in our lives. He cares about our every need, our every worry, our every tear. He loves us unconditionally and wants the best for us. So remember, in times of trouble, we are never alone. In times of trouble, Isaiah reminded everyone that God is like a caring shepherd. Isaiah also spoke of a servant who would suffer greatly. Picture this. A servant who, instead of being honored and respected, would face mistreatment and misunderstanding. A servant who wouldn't retaliate, nor would he voice his complaints. Sounds unusual, right? But Isaiah's prophecy was indeed about such a unique servant. This servant wouldn't be like any other. He wouldn't be one to rise against his tormentors, nor would he seek revenge. Instead, he would bear the burdens of others, taking upon himself the sorrows and pains of the world. Imagine a person so selfless, so full of compassion, that he would willingly endure suffering just to alleviate the suffering of others. Now you might wonder, who could this servant possibly be? Well, this prophecy of Isaiah was about none other than Jesus. Yes, Jesus, who is revered and loved by many, was once this suffering servant. He was the one who willingly faced mistreatment, who willingly bore the sorrows and pains of others. And why would he do this, you might ask? Because of his immeasurable love for us. He chose to suffer so that we wouldn't have to. He chose to die so that we could live. Such was the depth of his compassion. Such was the extent of his sacrifice. These words of Isaiah, spoken centuries before the birth of Jesus, painted a vivid picture of the trials and tribulations he would face. But they also highlighted his kindness, his selflessness, his unwavering commitment to humanity. This prophecy, like a beacon in the night, guided people towards understanding the true nature of Jesus. It served as a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, kindness and compassion can prevail. It served as a testament to Jesus' love for us, a love so profound that it led him to become the suffering servant. Isaiah told everyone about a servant who would carry our pains, and that servant was Jesus. Remember this, for it is a tale of love and sacrifice, a tale of the suffering servant who gave it all for us. Now, let's jump to another story about a different prophet, Jeremiah. This story takes us to a time when Jeremiah was led by God to a place we might not expect, a potter's house. Picture this, Jeremiah standing in the dusty doorway, watching as the potter sits at his wheel, his hands covered in clay. He's forming a pot, turning the clay round and round, shaping it with skill and precision. But even with the potter's experienced hands, something goes wrong. The pot doesn't turn out right. Perhaps it's lopsided, or maybe there's a crack that appeared out of nowhere. Now, you might think that the potter would be frustrated, right? Maybe he'd toss the pot aside and start anew. But that's not what happens. Instead, the potter takes the flawed pot and begins to reshape it. He doesn't discard it. He doesn't give up on it. He makes it into a new, beautiful pot. Isn't that an incredible image? This scene that Jeremiah witnesses, it's not just about a potter fixing a pot. It's a metaphor, a symbol that God uses to teach us something important about himself and about us. You see, we are like that clay pot. Each of us in our own way is a work in progress. Sometimes we make mistakes. We mess up. We're human after all. But here's the thing, just like the potter with his clay, God doesn't throw us away when we mess up. He doesn't discard us. No, he does something far better. God reshapes us. He takes our mistakes, our flaws, our failures, and he uses them to make us into something new, something better. He turns our mess-ups into masterpieces. And why does he do this? Well, because he loves us. Because to him we are precious, we are valuable. We are worth saving and worth reshaping. So if you ever feel like that flawed pot, if you ever feel like you've made too many mistakes, remember the potter and his clay. Remember that you're in the hands of a loving God who can turn your mistakes into something beautiful. Just like a skilled potter, God is patient. He doesn't rush the process. He takes his time shaping us, molding us, making us into the best versions of ourselves. It might not always be comfortable. It might not always be easy, but it's always worth it. So, let's take a moment to appreciate this profound lesson from the potter's house. Let's remember that no matter how many times we mess up, no matter how many times we fail, God is always there, ready to reshape us, ready to make us into something beautiful. Just like the potter with his clay, God can reshape us into something better. Jeremiah had another important message to share. Let's dive into it, shall we? In the heart of Jeremiah's story, we find a promise of a new covenant. Now, a covenant isn't just any ordinary promise. It's a sacred agreement, a bond of trust and commitment between two parties. In this case, the covenant was between God and his people. Jeremiah, being God's messenger, was given the task to deliver this divine promise. Picture him standing tall, speaking with conviction, his voice echoing across the lands. "The days are coming," he proclaimed, "when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and Judah." This wasn't going to be just a repeat of the old covenant, the one God made with their ancestors when he took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt. No, this was going to be something different, something new. God was promising a future where his laws wouldn't just be on stone tablets, but written directly on the hearts of his people, a future where everyone from the least to the greatest would know him directly, a future filled with a deep personal relationship with God, where everyone could call upon him and he would answer. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this new covenant was its emphasis on forgiveness. "I will forgive their wickedness," God promised through Jeremiah, "and will remember their sins no more." Picture that. A promise of complete forgiveness, of wiping the slate clean, of starting anew. It's like receiving a gift you didn't even know you needed until it was offered. This story of Jeremiah and the new covenant isn't just a tale from a bygone era. It's a story that resonates with us even today, touching on themes of hope, forgiveness, and unconditional love. It reminds us that no matter how far we may stray, no matter how many mistakes we might make, there's always a way back. There's always a chance for a fresh start. It tells us about a God who is ready to forgive, ready to forget our sins, ready to write his laws on our hearts, and ready to establish a direct personal relationship with us. It's a story that paints a picture of a God who loves us so much that he is willing to enter into a new covenant with us, a covenant of forgiveness and love. So, as we reflect on Jeremiah's message, let's remember the promise of the new covenant. Let's remember that we are loved deeply, and that we are forgiven fully, and that we are never too far gone to start anew. Through Jeremiah, God promised to forgive us and love us no matter what. And that, my friends, is a promise worth holding on to. These stories, though ancient, still speak to us today. They are more than just tales from a book. They are lessons of faith, hope, and redemption that transcend time. Let's take a moment to reflect on the wisdom we've gathered from these narratives. First, we journey through the prophecy of Isaiah. This story taught us about the coming of the Messiah, a beacon of hope and salvation. It reminded us of the power of faith, of believing in promises yet to be fulfilled. The prophecy was a message of hope, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel for the people of that time. And it remains so for us today. Even in our darkest hours, we can find comfort in the knowledge that we are not alone, that there's a divine plan at work, and that brighter days are on the horizon. Next, we delved into Isaiah's comforting message of God as a shepherd. This story painted a picture of a God who is not distant or indifferent, but one who tenderly cares for his flock. It showed us a God who leads us to green pastures, who restores our soul, who guides us along the right paths. It was a touching reminder of God's unwavering love and care for us, his children. We learned that no matter how far we may stray from the path, God, like a shepherd, is always there, ready to guide us back. We then explored the narrative of the suffering servant. This story was a poignant portrayal of sacrifice, of selfless love that knows no bounds. It taught us about the price of our redemption, the immense love that led the servant to bear our iniquities and carry our sorrows. It was a stark reminder of the depth of God's love for us, a love so profound that he was willing to suffer for our sake. This story calls us to emulate this selfless love in our interactions with others, to be willing to bear one another's burdens, and to love without expecting anything in return. Our journey continued with the story of Jeremiah and the potter's house. This narrative presented an allegory of God as the potter and us, his creation, as the clay. It taught us about God's sovereignty and his ability to reshape and remold us into something beautiful, even when we feel broken or marred. It was a powerful lesson on second chances and the transformative power of God's love. We learned that just like the clay in the potter's hand, we too can be shaped and reshaped into vessels of honor, no matter our past mistakes or failures. Finally, we reflected on Jeremiah and the new covenant. This story was a promise of a new beginning, of a relationship with God etched not on tablets of stone, but on the tablets of our hearts. It was a testament to God's unwavering faithfulness, his willingness to forgive and to make all things new. This story taught us that God's love is not contingent on our performance or our ability to keep the rules. Rather, his love is unconditional, steadfast, and it compels him to draw us closer to himself, to write his law on our hearts, and to remember our sins no more. Through these stories, we have seen a picture of a God who loves us deeply, who cares for us tenderly, and who is willing to go to great lengths to redeem us. We have seen a God who is patient, forgiving, and full of mercy. And we have seen a God who, like a potter, can take our mistakes, our failures, and our brokenness and turn them into something beautiful. These narratives serve as a reminder that no matter what we're going through, no matter how difficult or impossible the situation may seem, we are not alone. We have a shepherd who guides us, a servant who suffered for us, a potter who shapes us, and a God who loves us unconditionally and forgives us completely. So let's carry these lessons with us as we navigate through life. Let's remember to have faith in the promises yet to be fulfilled, to lean on our shepherd in times of need, to love selflessly as the suffering servant did, to allow ourselves to be reshaped by the potter's hand, and to embrace the new covenant of a relationship with God written on our hearts. Remember, just like in these stories, God is always with us, loving us, caring for us, and ready to turn our mistakes into something beautiful.